Oh, okay. I need to explain myself. I have tried this chaos like over 10 or 7 times. This team, I'm about to beat these, by the way. You saw my earlier video. This chaos was painful. If this was just 100 turns, this would be a cakewalk. And okay, it's not like even if it was 100 turns, it would still be kind of really annoying. This is not easy chaos. Even if it was 150 turns. Actually, no. If it were 150 turns, I think it would be easy. I could be retarded. Who knows? But this team that I'm using is from another YouTuber. And before you say anything, like, oh, you're using another person's team. Well, you know what? Any team you make in this game has probably been made by someone else. So don't say anything like that. So I'm using this another YouTuber used this team. He's a DFO YouTuber. I think his name is Trey. Um, sorry if I don't remember his name. He been making DFO videos for way longer than me. He plays JPN Global. He just put out a video today with this doing this chaos. Need to concentrate. And he used this team. So yeah, I'm about to. I have 0 spheres on Ramza and Quistis. The only sphere I have is Arciela sphere because that's about it. So thank Trey or whatever that YouTuber name is. Thank you so much. 30 turns. That's not good. Thirty turns. That's probably not good. So this team does work. It's really about, to me, RNG, or I could be mad at the game. Who knows?
Are our appetites, our desires, undermining us? Is the cart in front of the horse?
Gonna get both the buffs back up. If this one doesn't do, I'll try another. I think I messed up on a couple other turns. I don't like this man. Go back to the stance. Not gonna waste the EX.
For as long as human beings have been engaged in the art of philosophy, that has not been the definition of liberty. Living a life with absolutely zero constraints, with absolutely no thought for virtue, is called licentiousness.
She's gonna go behind. Oh wait, never mind.
Again, the virtues are the qualities that best form your character so you can live a flourishing life. You are literally learning or habituating yourself into becoming a free man. A state of liberty is reached when you're sufficiently embodying the virtues, because what we're really being liberated from are those slave pleasures, those appetites that consistently bring you down and away from right reason and your potential for excellence. In the political context, where liberty as a negative, this has generally meant freedom from an oppressive state, preventing you from doing things such as thinking, or choosing, or speaking, or worshiping, or the things that you would otherwise need in order to pursue happiness within the political community and civil society. Lord Acton phrased it this way: liberty is not a means to a higher political end. It is itself the highest political end. It is not
Oof.
good public administration that is
Yeah, I think I'm not gonna hit the turn count this time. I'm gonna do 3 attempts on this video.
to practice the moral virtues. There isn't exactly a set rule book for that, but we are offered a fair amount of choices. And with some of these choices, the ways in which the moral virtues are practiced can even alter the context of what makes up the noblest virtues. And this is one of the perennial features of Western civilization, in that we're considered the highest virtues for man can always be contemplated and debated, that we can try to figure out the principles most conducive to the good life. Plato wrote that the chief virtues were justice, prudence, temperance, and fortitude. And later, St. Paul would add on to those with his theological virtues: faith, hope, and charity, thus forming the 7 virtues of the school. If you read the Nicomachean Ethics, you'll know that Aristotle has his 11 virtues, which he comes to define by following his golden mean, or the middle state between that which is deficient and that which is excessive. Of these, he lists courage, moderation, liberality, magnificence, greatness of soul, ambition, gentleness, truthfulness, wittiness, and tact, friendliness, and justice, the proper application of which are described in the Ethics, and is probably a good place to start if you're interested in more. Later on in the Hellenistic era, we saw the rise of more practical life philosophies. Epicureanism was one example. It was founded by Epicurus in 307 BC and was primarily centered around living a life of mental tranquility and ease. He taught that you shouldn't be worried about death and the wrath of gods, and that the absence of disturbance was the key to true pleasure. Hence, one ought to stay away from things like politics or the pursuit of various passions, and stick to developing your friendships and other meaningful relationships. Another alternative was Stoicism. Compared to Epicureanism, Stoicism prohibited the isolationist life. It taught that one ought to pursue excellence in life, and that in order to accomplish such goals, you needed to live your life in harmony with the divine rationality of the universe. This meant cultivating a sense of justice, courage, temperance, and right reason. Cultivating your reason would help to reveal a cosmos that was rightly ordered and meaningful, thus serving as a model for human behavior and striving for the good. And, as Aristotle taught, because all human communities strive for the good, one ought to engage in politics in order to cultivate that good.
Nice try.
With endurance and self-control ultimately lead to inner tranquility.
I'm not gonna make turn count unless a miracle happens.
Virtues, or virtus, if you're reconstructed pronunciation categories, which means manly virtue. This included strength, loyalty, courage, wisdom, and moral purity. The poet Lucilius described it this way: virtues is to know the human relevance of each thing, to know what is humanly right and useful and honorable, and what things are good and what are bad, useless, shameful, and dishonorable. And, in addition, virtues is putting the country's interests first, then our parents with our own interests third and last. Fides, or faithfulness, was similarly held to high regard. This meant keeping to one's obligations, whether to the gods, to the community, or to the virtues that pertain to each sex. Or we can also follow in the steps of Cicero. We may find that studying philosophy leads to the best form of life, and philosophy is a way of life, a life of deep contemplation. You do not live like other people if you're a philosopher, and you may find that approaching the virtues to the philosophic life is more meaningful or conducive for happiness. As Cicero wrote, and as Ben Franklin repeats in his own autobiography, "O philosophy, guide of life, O searcher out of virtue and exterminator of vice, one day spent well and in accordance with thy precepts is worth an immortality of sin." We can also find an expression of the virtues in Judaism and Christianity, which, in the Western canon, the Christian texts are just as important for coming to a more complete understanding of human existence as are all the pagan texts. Today, the study of both, with an emphasis on Christianity, would probably fall into the field of Christian humanism. But this is not to exclude any Eastern texts, which are also worth studying. But obviously, in the West, Christianity has played a much more important role. And if you take revealed religion seriously, you'll come to find that it's totally possible that the moral virtues can also be delivered to us
I
by
think one of the main problems here is that I like to take out both mobs at the same time instead of one at a time.
who's by the divine example of Jesus
Uh,
all teachings. Those
I
doesn't
think
mean
that's
our rational
really
faculties
not benefiting me.
revelation. Because if God is the first cause or the unmoved mover, the
I'll
only
try
revelation
two more
or
times with
grasp
this
of moral
team.
reason must also have come from that first cause and can mediate between the space of revelation and human reason. Both reason and faith can be complementary in this area. Where there are deficiencies in reason, faith can come to its aid. And where faith is imperfect, reason can help attain some grasp of what is to be understood. But Galatians 5 in particular lays out some important virtues. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. And they that are Christ's have crucified the flesh with the affections and lusts. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. And I think it's perfect that these virtues are listed under the fruit of the Spirit. Because what is fruit? I mean, what do fruits do? They grow, they develop, and they mature. And so these virtues aren't just things that one exudes. Like all the others, they have to be cultivated. They're a part of one's character that must be developed. And in the Christian context, these fruits were embodied by Christ himself. And so it is by
I
his
could
example,
kill the one on white, but
grace, and the Holy Spirit,
if you see my other videos, I like to kill them both at the same time. And I think that's what's really crippling me.
warns against becoming a slave to your appetites.
Like that's been a golden rule since the beginning of the game. So I first started this game 2 years ago. Kill both mobs at the same time.
And the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary the one to the other.
Tell me if that's your style too.
Things that ye would. But if ye be led of the Spirit, ye are not under the law. Now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like. Of the which I tell you before, as I have also told you in time past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. The Islamic philosopher Al-Farabi also recognized the importance of noble virtues for the human condition, writing in his virtuous city that the forms and states of character from which these noble activities emanate are the virtues. They are not goods for their own sake, but goods only for the sake of happiness, which must have the input of reason. But now we need to go back to the American founding, because of the utmost importance to the framers was the creation of a new form of government that would allow people the greatest freedom to exercise their unalienable rights in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And this is where the Declaration of Independence is raised beyond the status of just a mere declaration, but a work of human excellence, because you cannot move beyond the principles of the Declaration without going backwards. Are you really going to say that all men are not created equal? Are you really going to say that all men do not have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Calvin Coolidge basically summed up the perennial truth of the Declaration in a speech on the 150th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. About the Declaration, there is a finality that is exceedingly restful. It is often asserted that the world has made a great deal of progress in 1776, that we have had new thoughts and new spirits.
Don't know what's gonna happen. Even pushing back doesn't matter. If I lose this one, this might be the closest I've ever gotten to the turn count.
Applied to this great charter. If all men are created equal, that is final. If they are endowed with inalienable rights, that is final. If governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, that is final. No advance, no progress can be made beyond these propositions. If anyone wishes to deny their truth or their soundness, the only direction in which he can proceed historically is not forward, but backward, toward the time where there was no equality, no rights of the individual, no rule of the people. Those who wish to proceed in that direction cannot lay claim to progress. They are reactionary. Their ideas are not more modern, but more ancient than those of the revolutionary fathers. So this is the greatest document for human liberty that man has ever created. But what form of government best secures those rights? Certainly not what they had in England. That's obvious. But what the framers ultimately settled on was a republic. Why a republic? Well, first, we need to remember just
Yeah, I didn't make it. I'll give it a second try. This is the closest I've ever gotten.
Court and Capitol building all take architectural influence from the Romans. Our newspapers often have the word tribune in them. We have a city named after Cincinnatus, and the colonists frequently took Roman pseudonyms in their writings, such as Trenchard and Gordon writing in Mercator's letters or the Federalist Papers with the name of Coolidge. But in the area of the Republican form of government, one of the most important ideas to come out of the Roman Republic was the concept that's accompanied public spiritedness. But we need to take a step back. When people generally think of Rome, they tend to think of colosseums and pantheons. But what they don't remember is that those things were constructed during the time of the Roman Empire. The Republic didn't have these things.
I'm desperate.
About Rome was its republican qualities. Because in a republic, you have citizens. In an empire, you have subjects. Take the Latin word for republic, res publica, which means a public affair, or the people's affairs, the people's business. This means
So close. Yeah, so literally one turn. I think I'm about to kill him right now. 2 turns off. So I'm gonna try again.
The idea of being a self-governing citizen was huge for the founders, because in contrast to monarchy, a republican citizen has control over their own
I
destiny.
have Quistis fully boarded. I'll show you him in a minute after
Because by the nature of having a republican
after
to have the requisite virtues needed
yeah.
for self-governance and its accompanying freedom. This is very much what Shakespeare may have been referring to in Julius Caesar, when Cassius says, "Men at some time are masters of their fates. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves."
So here's what it looks like.
Cassius is warning Brutus.
I got all summon board. I got all summon boards, all character boards. No sphere. I forgot what I did with the sphere, honestly. I put Quistis sphere on Kefka. So whenever it's Kefka time, he's gonna smash. Yeah, look at this. And I put the eye patch key sphere on him. When inflicting debuff on target, boost brave by for 5 turns. Yeah, I made Kefka a god in this game, and well worth it. He may not be good with this chaos, but he's gonna smash others. I got her own sphere, all her character boards 3/3. All of Quistis character boards 3/3. Her arts are not that good. Her arts are kind of trash, but she's boosted, which should help. So I'm gonna try again.
Not a monarchic republic, not an aristocratic republic, not an oligarchic republic, but a democratic republic. Today, these words have become so intertwined that when one
Jesus. Okay.
it is assumed that he means a form of government that respects civil liberties and democratic norms. And when one speaks of a democracy, it is assumed that they mean it.
A friend Quist is gonna do 9/9 anyway. So second time I'm gonna be silent and try to take my time. I have rage quit the game for like 2 days trying to complete this chaos, so I'm gonna be silent and just take my time.
But first, let's start with the name that they wrote the essays under. There was a reason why these guys chose the pseudonym Publius. Many don't remember this, but before the Federalist Papers were published, there was another pseudonymous author writing under the name of Caesar in defense of the newly drafted Constitution. We think it might have been Alexander Hamilton, but given all the evidence we have, it doesn't seem likely. Either way, the essays released under Caesar didn't take off so well. And once you compare who the actual Caesar was to who Publius was, this kind of makes sense. In Plutarch's Lives, Publius Valerius was so loved by the people that he was given the name Publicola, which means the people's friend, people lover. And the reason why they loved him so much was because he helped to overthrow the monarchy and found the republic. And so it's very fitting that the writings under Caesar failed to launch compared to the writings of Publius. Because as Martin Diamond writes, Caesar destroyed a republic, Publius saved one. So the essays under the Federalist Papers already have some good Republican marketing going for them. But the contention made by Publius is that they have created a constitution that maintains a republican form of government, all the while curing the disease endemic to republics by embodying the principles of representation, separation of powers, protection from oppressive majorities through multiplicity of factions and self-interest, the enlargement of the orbit of the republic, and by preserving the spirit and the form of popular government. In 85 essays, they state their defense of the Constitution in some of the most significant writings in political science we've ever seen. But they also made another contention, that the people ought to obtain for rulers men who possess most wisdom to discern and most virtue to pursue the common good of the society. Now that presupposes that the themselves are of such high character that they can discern who possesses the most wisdom to discern and the most virtue to pursue the common good of the society. Which gets us to the most significant aspect of the Republican form of government. If the American people are expected to be self-governing, then they need to be habituated into certain kinds of behaviors and habits. These behaviors and habits are encompassed by what we call the Republican virtues. If you recall, virtues are those qualities that allow something to be brought in its best condition to perform its function well. So the Republican virtues are the qualities that make the Republican form of government function well and perform its work with excellence. To this end, the Republican virtues are generally understood to encompass popular sovereignty, liberty, civic virtue, and public spiritedness. And these Republican virtues presuppose other virtues as well: prudence, self-restraint, truthfulness, diligence, goodwill, and a whole host of others. Because in a large republic with millions of people, you are not going to get a uniformity of opinion on political matters. Sometimes your personal interests will be at odds with the public interest. And so you have to go about the political process with a much more temperate, deliberative, and humble approach. Pluralism will always be a feature of American life because we have such a diversity of thought in this country by the very nature of its existence. But more to the importance of virtue in a republic, as Pugliese writes in Federalist 55, Republican government presupposes the existence of these qualities in a higher degree than any other form, or the pictures which have been drawn by the political jealousy of some among us, faithful likenesses of the human character.
I'm gonna try to do one at a time, which is not my style.
Self-governance, and that nothing less than the chains of despotism can restrain them from destroying and devouring one another. And this is because, as Harvey Mansfield notes, self-government isn't just a gift. It requires judgment, tact, participation, and individual cultivation. There is a reason why Federalist 1 tries to promote the idea of establishing good government by reflection and choice. Because to reflect on something is to think about something, to make sure that what you are doing is right, to make sure that what you are doing is good, that you have thought through all the alternatives and trade-offs, that you have consulted the fundamental principles, and that you ultimately make your decision, make your choice, and participate in
Perfect.
self-government. But take the importance of virtue from the founders. From George Washington, virtue or morality is a necessary spring of popular government. Ben Franklin, only virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become more corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. John Adams, religion and virtue are the only foundations, not only of republicanism and of all free government, but of social felicity under all government and in all combinations of human society. James Madison, to suppose that any form of government...
I should, I'll plug my phone up after this battle. After this attempt.
Virginia Declaration of Rights, no free government or the blessings of liberty can be preserved to any people but by a firm adherence to justice, moderation, temperance, frugality, and virtue. But let's dig into the importance of each of these Republican virtues, starting with popular sovereignty. This is essentially synonymous with the idea of the consent of the governed. We, the people, agree to place a government over ourselves because we recognize that government, or specifically the government under the Constitution, is the best structure to protect our natural rights, and those who govern do so at our pleasure, because we the people give it power. Now, of course, at the time of the founding, these principles were not equally applied to everyone. The idea of representation and popular sovereignty sounds like a joke to the slave.
I'm getting too excited, better calm down. Too excited.
Courage and a lot of bloodshed for the natural rights of human beings.
I thought I was gonna break them, doesn't matter.
But only by bringing the principles of the Declaration out to the public and showing where society
Less than 30. I might do, this might be it. Less than 30.
are particularly egregious determinists, because these people do not believe in the human conscience. They deny that some human beings are moral creatures, or even fully human, and hence they fail to have any perspective on human dignity and justice. This stain on the founding is recognized by most people today as the original sin of the nation. But for the purposes of a well-functioning republic, you cannot dispense with popular sovereignty. Liberty. Now, the Revolutionary period had two conceptions of liberty. As C. Bradley Thompson writes, there is liberty as a volitional fact of human nature, and liberty as a moral requirement for human
Come on,
flourishing.
slow down your ass.
We look at what man is as a creature. We are thinking creatures. We are creatures with a moral sensibility. We have the capacity for reason. We are able to choose and to act on our choices. We are not just beasts.
After his EX, then I'm gonna shout again.
By our morality, which means that we make moral choices. In this sense, liberty is the capacity to choose between right and wrong, good and bad, just and unjust. Or as the Reverend Levi Hart said in the 1774 sermon, liberty is is a power of action or a certain suitableness or preparedness for exertion in a freedom
Don't want to shout the one out.
from any external cause.
That rhymes.
Liberty, when predicated of a man as a moral agent and accountable creature, is that suitableness or preparedness to be the subject of volitions or exercise
Whiskey plays.
reference to moral objects by the influence of motives, which we find belongeth to all men of common capacity and who are come to the years of understanding. This type of liberty is probably best reflected.
Does his EX add shouts? Am I just not noticing this? Did I not notice this through the entire Wemsa saga? Someone tell me.
Being able to think, to discourse, and to act on your choices is the purpose of volitional liberty.
Look how far B is back. That's ridiculous.
To this end, the laws must also reflect the proper balance.
That's absurd.
And be sure to respect man's right to private
I need to do the same thing to A.
of becoming your own man. As John Adams wrote, the protection of private property indeed implies liberty, because property cannot be secure unless the man be at liberty to acquire, use, or part with it at his discretion, and unless he have his personal liberty of life and limb, motion and rest for that purpose. James Harrington and Rousseau are both adamant that you cannot be a free person unless you are self-governing, and if we're expected to govern ourselves, then we must have the volitional liberty to be able to do so. Again, this is not liberty as license, or doing whatever you want with no restraints in your behavior and living like a beast. That is slavery to yourself. Volitional liberty is a liberty that is required for political ends as responsible citizens. Now, the moral requirement of liberty was for the end of human flourishing, something much more in line with the previous discussions on virtue. As John Milton would write in his second defense, to form and increase virtue, the most excellent
Speed down on both. Good.
Rousseau would also write that there can be no patriotism without liberty, no liberty without virtue, no virtue without citizens. And as noted earlier from George Mason, no free government or the blessings of liberty can be preserved to any people but by a firm adherence to justice, moderation, temperance, frugality, and virtue. You need these things in order to have these things. Whereas Gordon S. Wood writes in the Radicalism of the American Revolution, liberty was realized when the citizens were virtuous, that is, willing to sacrifice their private interests for the sake of the community, including serving in public office without pecuniary rewards. Which gets us to our next Republican virtue, the civic virtues. Now this is where you come in. This is where the idea of self-government really comes into action. The civic virtues solely concern how to be a good citizen, how to interact.
Just in case, I'll have 2 turns of both skills left.
Best suitable for these tasks. Now, in the founding, this was more or less synonymous with the idea of public virtue or disinterestedness, in distinction to private interest or private desires, which were purely selfish. But as Robert A. Goldman writes, the founders had in mind town councils, state legislatures, jury duty, voting for local, state, and federal officials, lobbying, organizing interest groups, as part of the activities that cultivate the civic virtues. And given that the Republic was established under the principles of a decentralist federalism, these activities take place first and foremost in your own local community. As Martin Diamond writes, they are the daily things, the intra-regime things, that make up the vast bulk of a government's business, the little things, immensely interesting to most men, which may be done safely and salutarily by the locality in whatever way it chooses. And this is exactly what our Constitution is designed to facilitate and accommodate. This is what it means to have decentralized institutions, that the responsibility of self-government is in the hands of you, your community, and your local government before it is the responsibility of your state or the federal government. That the local institutions of your family, neighborhood, community, church, volunteer organization, your workplace, the PTA, and local government should be the first responders to the vast majority of decisions that are made in your life, because that's literally where you live your life. You don't live your life on the national scale. That is both unnatural and impossible, and some might even say tyrannical, because you cannot be adequately represented on such a large scale. You live your life in whatever small corner of the country it is that you live in, with whatever relationships and interactions that you have in that small corner of the country. The sheer size of America and the diversity of people living here makes this one of the most accommodating systems to live your life with your community of people in the best way you see fit, barring any obvious discriminatory practices or violations of natural rights, or basically the Constitution.
About to get galvanized back up.
Or to put it in a different way, the people of Eugene, Oregon do not live the same way as the Amish in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. They have different norms, customs, values, entire ways of living. Our decentralized and federalist Constitution allows for this diversity of communities.
This is great.
We're not a homogenous nation. Some people want to live differently from others, and some people will pursue different policies which they believe is best for the community. But the point is, the more that these types subsumed by the larger power of the centralized government, the less free you are, and the less opportunity there is to practice self-government and to be a real citizen. Now, at the time of the American founding, this wasn't exactly a dire concern for the nation. As Forrest McDonald writes, the colonists had had abundant political experience. Probably more Americans have participated directly in government at one level or another than any other people on Earth. And this experience would also be helpful for being able to recognize in those who wish to wield political power.
It's gonna be an HP attack. I know it is.
As Publius writes, the Republican principle
It's gonna be an HP attack. Please survive. Please, please survive.
the management of their affairs.
Please
It does
survive.
not require an unqualified
Oh,
allegiance
thank
to
God.
every sudden breeze of passion or to every transient impulse which the people may receive.
I'm gonna get speed down the second one.
Flatter their prejudices to betray their interests. A proper education in the civic virtues serves as a guard against corruption, which by the nature of republics they are highly susceptible to. As Gordon S. Wood writes, monarchies could tolerate great degrees of self-interestedness, private gratification, and corruption.
I don't want to waste the EX. That's one of the rules.
Subservient and had all sorts of adhesives and connections besides virtue to hold their societies together. Monarchies relied on blood, family, kinship, patronage, and ultimately fear. But republics could never resort to such force. In their purest form, they had no adhesives, no bonds holding themselves together, except their citizens' voluntary patriotism and willingness to obey public authority. Without virtue and self-sacrifice, republics would fall apart. Which brings us to the final republican virtue, public-spiritedness. Machiavelli would write in his discourses on living that it is not the pursuit of individual
Get your
good,
ass
but the
down.
common good that makes cities great. And it is beyond doubt that the common good is never considered except in republics. To be a truly republican man means to look out for your fellow citizen. You are not just out for yourself living an atomistic existence. You are a participant in self-government, beginning in the family and spreading out into your local community, its various institutions, associations, and the local government. And one cannot be public-spirited without first being inculcated in civic activities and being educated on responsibilities of citizenship. When you start a foundation to help people in need, create an association to help kids build character, or volunteer at a local food bank, or simply participate in a town hall and deliberate and debate a topic of importance for your community, you are doing things in the interest of the common good. You are embodying the ideals of public-spiritedness. Robert A. Goldman writes that experience in the exercise of political rights would habituate the self-seeking individual in behavior that was moderate, considerate of others, conciliatory, civil, and compromising, very much like that of a truly public-spirited citizen. By living your life in the service of others and by sacrificing your own interests for the sake of the community, you are better able to cultivate the republican virtues and be a free, self-governing individual. But that basically covers the republican virtues. Though there is one more thing to consider. Inherent to public spirit,
I'm not making it.
spirit is influenced by some ethical or
This
when you engage in politics,
is so frustrating.
opinions about what ought to be pursued in politics, or decide what is good for people, or what is good in general. Those ideas and inquiries come after the fact of your moral development. Your moral development may not be complete or very sound, but you are nonetheless making political decisions and shaping your ideas of civics and policy based on your moral foundation. And this gets us to that other idea that weighed heavily on the founders and was just as important for the health and longevity of a republic: morality. If you are trying to create a national polity that respects the significance of the republican form of government, that respects the principles of a decentralist federalism, and that attempts to live the best and freest life attainable, they need to be moral people. And as Donald Lutz noted, the book that was most frequently cited by the Americans during the founding era is the book of Deuteronomy. The biblical tradition is most prominent among the citations. There was no other book on the continent that the founders were more familiar with. Colonial society was infused with the Christian culture, from their schools, their homes, their governments, and in their writings. Nearly all of the founders saw a religious education as protecting against the excesses of vice. The preamble to Patrick Henry's bill establishing a provision for teachers of the Christian religion states that the general diffusion of Christian knowledge has a natural tendency to correct the morals of men, restrain their vices, and preserve the peace of society. The founders thought that the virtues promoted by Christianity were necessary to preserve the moral and civic core of the nation. These virtues, when properly adhered to, would help detain those passionate elements of human nature. You don't come to politics without some semblance of an ethical or moral framework, be it something derived from your family, your childhood, or life experiences. But in the religious context, it's not just that you are given a set of standards or truths to follow, but that you were born with obligations. Harry Jaffa put this rather succinctly.
Second one will die.
Each individual has a relationship with God that is prior, both logically and ontologically, to his membership in the political
Might be the one.
individual is a citizen,
Just calm down.
city of God before
Just calm down.
This changes the nature of one's responsibilities while on earth, because the superordinate duties to God means you'll be acting in a certain way to best effectuate your spiritual salvation. In the words of Paul Ray, membership in a close-knit religious association provides individuals with a sense of place, and like citizenship in the Greek polis, it brings the force of shame to bear in a fashion that encourages self-restraint, decency, and a spirit of self-sacrifice. Your citizenship in the city of God complements your citizenship to your country, and it helps to promote the civic virtues and cultivate
I messed up.
patriotism. But take it from the founders. As John Adams said, I once
No, I
said that the
didn't.
Hebrews have done more to civilize men than any other nation, and facilitate to mankind the doctrine of a supreme, intelligent, wise, almighty sovereign of the universe, which I believe to be the great essential principle of all morality, and consequently of all civilization. He also stated that the Bible contains the most profound philosophy, the most perfect morality. It is the most republican book in the world, and that religion and morality alone can establish the principles upon which freedom can securely stand. Thomas Jefferson, of all the systems of morality, ancient or modern, which have come under my observation, none appear to me so pure as that of Jesus. Ben Franklin, as to Jesus of Nazareth, I think his system of morals and his religion, as
Did I do it?
to us, the best the world ever saw or is likely to see.
75.
With us, Christianity
I think that counts.
it would be strange indeed if with such a people our institutions did not presuppose
So I don't remember the name. I think that's it. I think I did it.
civil relations with it. James Madison,
Yep, did it.
God all-powerful, wise and good, is so essential
Woo! Okay, I don't know. I forgot the name of the YouTuber.
which enforce it.
But thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, the sub. I did this the last chaos. I'm saving for Amy.
Whose morality is so sublime and pure, which denounces
Yeah.
against the wicked eternal misery, and which ensure to the good eternal happiness, undermining
yeah.
the solid foundation.
Now I'm just gonna continue doing daily quests and farming and stuff. But
The experience of all time shows
yeah, Whams are still God,
Benjamin Rush,
and I plan to use them until I plan to use them in burst.
religion. Without this, there could be no
Him and Amy together, or him and Quistis, Amy combination. I'm thinking of Amy, Quistis,
religion is better than no religion.
and Whamza,
For every religion that reveals the
or Amy, Quistis, and Kefka, Abomination team.
inculcated upon our youth, then see them
I wish you could name teams,
religious principles.
but yeah,
Though even then he would still conclude, but the religion I mean
but yeah.
in this place is the religion of the New Testament.
I made Kefka is gonna be Kefka is God. I made Kefka a God. This whole era was wonderful.
By morality and religion, avarice and
I'm talking like I just won a football game because I basically did. I made it, man.
was made only for immoral.
I joined
It is wholly
when Whelm first showed up. It was before EX,
function well unless its people are moral and religious. That's how
and man, this was a journey.
Alexis de Tocqueville picked
This
up on
was a
this
journey,
American.
man.
Americans combined
This was a journey. Let me show you all the things that I had. Let me show you all the EXs that I got from these 2 years.
that while the law permits the Americans to do what they please, religion prevents them from conceiving and forbids them to commit what is rash or unjust. Religion in America
Got one
takes no
ingot.
direct part in the government of society.
Doesn't
It must
matter.
be regarded as the first of their political
I might purple.
does not impart a taste
I might purple Noctis just because I know how good his
of sincere faith in the religion.
BT and LD is.
But I am certain that they hold it to be indispensable to the
And
maintenance
yeah.
of republican institutions. This opinion is not peculiar to a class of citizens which
Obtained. I wonder what that's gonna look like.
nation to every rank of society.
Oh, wait a
Now, at
second.
the time of the founding, the individual
I forgot
states
how,
were given far more leeway in establishing their own religions. But given the sheer diversity of people
Forgot how realized work.
in America today,
Forgot how obtained work.
the individual states aren't established
Man.
religions anymore. And there are certainly a good number of
Ridiculous. I remember when I used Whamza on like every chaos. That was fun times.
exist in greater purity the less they are mixed together. If anything, Benjamin Rush's
Kefka is gonna go far in the burst era. I know he is.
some religion than none in your private life. But even then, it would be imprudent to say that a-religious people aren't or can't
Remember when she was one of the best units?
out there who are nonetheless very decent people. But I think something that
Good
most
times,
people
man.
appreciate
Good
is that even though not
times.
religious, but still more or less a person in line with some of the basic tenets of Christianity.
Remember when she was the best battle? She still is technically, but her damage output would not survive burst.
With a religious education. And I think George Washington
Her damage output just ain't enough.
pretty well. Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable.
I used
Gain with that man
Lulu on like
great pillars of
I think three or four vids, 3 or 4 chaoses,
equally with the pious man.
and dimensions end.
A volume could not trace all their connections with private and public felicity.
I use Edge to absolute death. I used them on my selfie saga, the longest saga on this channel, where I just literally EX spam a Edge or a Zack and just whoop absolutely just bop and cheese chaoses. I got the entire FF9 team purpled except Steiner. So that's
The specifics of how Christianity is generally
her.
we'll begin to see why it was deemed so important for Republican government and civil society.
I barely use Fran, but she's waifu, and that's my username. I think I use Beatrix during the selfie saga. Once again, just go down my videos. My selfie saga was absolutely insane. I used Beatrix to absolute death. I just got bored of her. I used her too much. The selfie, one of the best, my favorite units in the game, because you can EX spam so much. Characters that benefit from EX spam like Edge, Beatrix. I haven't used her with Cloud of Darkness. Wonder how that's gonna be, but yeah. Lightning, I never use Lightning. I just recently purpled her and I don't use her. I find her very hard to use, but I'm just gonna use her as Dimensions and fodder. Him, I absolutely love him. You saw my previous video. I love his terror mechanic. If you use him correctly, you can just lock units, especially with Kefka or Arciela. You can just really just scale to spam, and the unit can't do anything. Do not regret purpling. Glad I purpled. And I don't even remember the last time I used Arnea. She's just a pure DPS unit and delay unit. That's it. Garnet. You'll be seeing Garnet a lot. You saw her in a couple other videos back then. I'm gonna use her all the way. I'm gonna use her far in the BT era. Lena, you saw my Lena saga when I paired her up with Goluf and Wamsa and other units. Absolutely one of the best, my favorite units in this entire game. And I'll try to use her in a couple of BT chaoses. And Christus definitely. So yeah, I know what the future looks like, and I'm gonna purple Noctis. I think I got all his weapons. Let me see.
So in this sense, one can form the conception of self-interest well understood by means of humanitarian work, volunteer work, being fulfilled in their job as they serve others, being fulfilled in their community, or being fulfilled in their religion.
Art's good enough.
Christianity tells us that one must prefer others to oneself to gain heaven, but Christianity tells us as well that one ought to do good to those like oneself.
Yeah, I got all this stuff.
That is a magnificent expression. Man penetrates divine
One.
intelligence. He sees that the goal of God is order. He freely associates himself with that great design, and all the while sacrificing his particular interests to the admirable order of all things, he expects no other recompense than the pleasure of contemplating it. When someone joins the military to serve their country,
Yeah, gonna purple Amy and Noctis. When they Amy and Noctis. And just I know Van or Vons. BT comes before Noctis. I'm pretty sure that's the schedule. But I'm just gonna get Vaughn's LD. I never use Vaughn anyway.
The doctrine of self-interest, well understood, does not produce great devotion,
But
but it suggests little sacrifices each day.
wait a second.
Itself, it cannot make a
I don't think I have all his weapons.
multitude of citizens who are regulated, temperate, moderate, far-sighted, masters of themselves. And if it does not lead directly to virtue through the will, it brings them near to it insensibly through habits. Now all these things, virtue, religion, morality, and good habits, are all what are supposed to be inherent to a liberal
I
arts education. Education was huge for the founders.
I can do it right now. Wait a second.
Religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, schools and the means of education shall forever be encouraged. Or as the 1780 Constitution of Massachusetts states, wisdom and knowledge, as well as virtue, diffused generally among the people, being necessary for the preservation of their rights and liberties, and as these depend on spreading the opportunities and advantages of education among the different orders of the people, it shall be the duty of legislatures and magistrates in all future periods of this.
Okay, so yeah, when his banner comes, I'll already have a copy of his 15 and just pull for his LD. And that's it. And then pull for Amy LD. So here's my schedule. Amy, Vaughn's LD, Noctis BT and LD. And that's it. And then after that, it's whatever. So see ya. This is the end of the EX era. And waifus first.